Okay, our topic would be histology of the endocrine system. Okay, the objectives for this session would be to know the different organs of the endocrine, and microscopically, we will be to study each endocrine organ. Okay, so this will be the following endocrine organs. You have the pituitary gland or the master gland. Your pineal gland is also located in the brain. Your thyroid glands and the parathyroid glands are located at the cervical area or at the neck, anterior roof of the neck. Pancreas, specifically the islets of Langerhans, that would be the endocrine part, because the exocrine part of the pancreas are pancreatic acinar cells or pancreatic acinos. Your adrenal glands is also known as our suprarenal glands because they lie above your kidneys, kaya suprarenal. And the placenta is actually an endocrine organ. Take note also well that the gonads or the ovaries and testes are actually not just part of the reproductive system, but also they are of endocrine system. Okay, but we will not be taking up the ovaries and testes because we just had we discussed already for the past 2 weeks the male and the female reproductive system. So we'll just going to review that as well. Okay. All right, so these are the following, or the location of the major endocrine organs. The major endocrine organs are, this is the pituitary gland and the pineal gland, the occipital part. The thyroid gland is also a major endocrine organ, and located posteriorly of the thyroid gland are the 4 parathyroid glands. Okay. All right, what else? The pancreas, no? This is the pancreas. This is the islets of Langerhans. Yan, yung yellow part na yan. This is the head of the pancreas. The suprarenal or the adrenal glands, it lies above the kidneys and the gonads, testes, and the ovaries. Okay, so let's start with the pituitary glands. Actually, the pituitary gland is divided into 2. You have the anterior and posterior. But please take note, class, no, the posterior pituitary will not secrete these 2 hormones. Okay, the antidiuretic hormone and the oxytocin, they don't secrete these 2. So, kung hindi sila nagsisecrete, saan sila galing? Sa hypothalamus po. Okay? These are the antidiuretic hormone and the oxytocin. They are secreted in the hypothalamus, class. Pero dadalhin lang ni hypothalamus through the hypothalamic pituitary stalk o pituitary may hypothalamus pituitary stalk. Diyan siya dadalhin sa posterior pituitary to store and to release it as the need arises. Okay? But the pituitary gland, anterior pituitary gland secretion contains the following hormones. Okay, what else? Yeah, we will be discussing this one by one in a while. All right, so the master gland or the pituitary gland is composed of the neurohypophysis and the anterior hypophysis. Now, as I mentioned, the neurohypophysis and the neurohypophysis is also known as the posterior pituitary gland. This is the part that develops from the neural ectoderm, and it consists of the pars nervosa and infundibulum. Right? The infundibulum of the neural stalk is actually an infundibular stem that is found specifically at the median eminence of the tuberous scenario. So, saan siya mamaya discuss natin. For the anterior pituitary gland, it is also known as our Adeno Hypothesis, and this is the part of the pituitary that arises from the oral ectoderm. If Adeno Hypothesis is from the oral, the neurohypophysis is from the neural ectoderm. Okay, take note of that. And the Adeno Hypothesis or the anterior is divided into 3 portions. We have pars distalis, pars tuberalis, and pars intermedia. O ano pa isang pars? It's the pars nervosa. That is part of the posterior pituitary. So ang clue nyo, isa lang pars ang nasa posterior pituitary, and that is the pars nervosa. No? Kasi nga galing siya sa neurohypophysis. Okay? Pakita natin to. So this is the pituitary gland. Okay. Can you see my cursor? Follow my cursor, okay? So if this is the hypothalamus, as I mentioned, two hormones are being secreted here and pupunta yan dito sa posterior pituitary. Okay, that is the antidiuretic hormone and oxytocin. Kaya nga ang part lang ng posterior pituitary would be the infundibular stalk and the posterior pituitary or the pars nervosa. Okay, this is the posterior. The anterior part would be it's subdivided into three. You have the majority of the anterior pituitary is composed of the pars distalis. Okay, and the pars intermedia is located in between the pars distalis or the anterior pituitary and the pars nervosa, which is part of the posterior pituitary. So madaling tandaan kasi they are intermediate between the two. They are located between the pars distalis and pars nervosa. And the last pars would be the pars tuberalis. Nandun lang siya nakakabit sa infundibular stalk ng posterior pituitary. Pero part siya ng anterior pituitary. Okay? Now, all in all, the pituitary gland lies here. This is the hypophyseal fossa. Fossa is the space in the sella thoracica of the sphenoid bone. This is the sphenoid bone, class. So any tumor of the pituitary gland talaga maapektuhan lahat ng katawan because these are actually regulatory hormones, specifically with the anterior pituitary gland. Okay? Okay, so as I mentioned, pars distalis composed of the majority or 70% of the anterior pituitary gland. And we have two types of cells that are found in the pars distalis. We have the chromophils and the chromophobe cells. Let's start with the chromophil. So ano ibig sabihin class ng chromophil? They have the affinity to dyes. So to acid dye and basic dye. Okay? So in your examination, if I ask you, these are the hormones that are being secreted by the acidophils. Growth hormone and prolactin. For the basic dye or basophils, you have TSH or the thyroid stimulating hormone, your follicle stimulating hormone, your luteinizing hormone or ICSH or the interstitial cell stimulating hormone, and the ACTH or the adrenocorticotrophic hormone. Okay? In the examination, I will be asking you growth hormone, for example, is secreted by what cell in the pars distalis? Don't just answer acidophil. Okay? But it is correct. Ang choice na lalagay ko would be acidophilic chromophil. Okay? Basophilic chromophil and chromophobe. Those are the choices. But just memorize or take note the hormones being secreted by each cell. Doc, paano yung mga chromophobe cells? The chromophobe cells stain weakly with few or no secretory granules. So they just represent a heterogeneous group, including the stem cells, the undifferentiated progenitor cells, and the degranulated cells. So meaning, wala talaga siyang secretion. Wala siya talagang hormones. Until now, they haven't proven anything na may hormones na sinisikip ang chromophobe cells. But these two cells, the acidophilic chromophil and the basophilic chromophil, they produce these hormones. Okay? So just take note kung ano talaga, kung acidophilic ba siya or basophilic. Okay, Doc, what about the pars tuberalis? This is just a funnel-shaped region surrounding in the infundibulum, and most of the cells of the pars tuberalis, take note, are gonadotropes. Okay, gonadotropes. So ano yung gonadotropes? These are the LH, the FSH, and the ICSH. So yun daw yun, no? Dati kasi wala talaga siyang secretion or hindi siya talaga well-studied. But the pars tuberalis, most of the cells found here are gonadotropes, gonads. And lastly, there are pars intermedia that is found between the anterior and posterior pituitary. Nasa gitna siya. This is just a rudimentary region that is made up of cords, darkly basophilic cells that present a small secretory granules. The follicle in the pars intermedia are actually lined with simple cuboidal epithelium, and the characteristic feature of your pars intermedia are your Ratkes cysts. Okay, meron ba tayong picture dito, Ratkes cysts? Okay, mamaya, bigyan ko kayo ng example ng Ratkes cyst. Now, what is the significance of the pars intermedia? Not just the Ratkes cyst, but the pars intermedia, the cells found in the pars intermedia, they synthesize melanocyte stimulating hormone or your MSH. Okay? MSH or the melanocyte stimulating hormone, pars intermedia. Yan. At paano malaman ng pars intermedia? They are found in between the anterior and posterior, and because of this, Ratkes cysts. Okay? Okay, so let's continue. So this is the pars nervosa. This is the pars distalis, the tuberalis, the infundibular stalk, and the pars intermedia. So class, itong mga to, these are the Ratkes cysts. So pag tinanong natin to sa practical exam, identify structure pointed, these are our Ratkes cysts. Identify location, they are located at the pars intermedia. What is the secretion of the pointed division of the pituitary gland? It secretes melanocyte stimulating hormone. Okay, if you notice, these are the dark staining structure. These are the anterior pituitary. The light staining structure are your part of the posterior pituitary gland. Okay. Pars distalis, as mentioned a while ago, they are composed of 3 cells. Actually, 3 cells: the acidophilic chromophil, the basophilic chromophil, and the chromophobes. C stands for chromophobe, or they weakly stain. So yun, hindi siya masyado na stain. But for the A, acidophilic, kaya nga siya pinkish or reddish in appearance because they are acidophilic. They have affinity to the acidic dye. What about the B, or the basophilic cells? Basophilic cells are the basophilic chromophil. Yun yung mga dark staining blue. Okay? What else? Then these are acidophilic. S stands for stroma, or sinusoidal capillaries. Ayan. So, this is another picture of the hypothalamus that goes to the pituitary gland. So nakita nyo yung mga blood vessels, because endocrine glands, as mentioned in your first lecture, nagre-release sila ng hormones through the bloodstream. Kaya nga ito ay puro blood vessels. Okay, napakadaming blood vessels. So let's continue the discussion. At the anterior pituitary, we have number 1, thyroid cells or thyrotrophic cells secreting TSH, which acts on the thyroid gland. The thyroid stimulating hormones, anterior pituitarian. What else that are found in the anterior pituitary? You have the mammotropic cells. They secrete the prolactin, which acts on the mammary glands and testis. Okay, prolactin. Let's have a discussion in a while. TSH, acidophilic or basophilic? It's basophilic. The prolactin, is it acidophilic or basophilic? It's acidophilic. The corticotrophic cells that are found at the anterior pituitary secrete ACTH, or the adrenal corticotropic hormone, which acts on the adrenal cortex, as the name implies. Somatotrophic cells secrete growth hormone, which acts on all body tissues, especially the bones, the muscles, and the adipose connective tissue. So the somatotrophic cells are the secreting growth hormone, and the mammotrophic cells secreting prolactin. These two are being secreted by your acidophilic chromophils. The rest, basophilic. Okay, what else? The gonadotropic cells secrete FSH and the luteinizing hormone, which acts on the gonads, which are your testes and your ovaries. Okay, which is also being secreted by your basophilic chromophil. Okay, found at the pars intermedia, cells would be, no, does this cell secrete melanocyte stimulating hormone which acts on the melanocytes in the epidermis. Mali yung turo dito ng buko. Dapat dito siya sa pars intermedia. Okay? Okay. So, in the pituitary gland, just you have to know the classification of each hormones. At ang cells na tawag sa kanya would be the thyrotropic cells, mammotropic cells, and the corticotropic cells. Okay, it's not mentioned here, but the posterior pituitary, no, they just store and release antidiuretic hormone and oxytocin. Okay, class, saan ba siya nagsasecrete? At the hypothalamus. The antidiuretic hormone is to regulate the water sodium balance in the body, while your oxytocin, it stimulates the uterine contraction during labor. So those are the two hormones that are being released by the posterior pituitary gland, okay, as the need arises. Nandyan lang siya. I-release na lang niya kapag kailangan. Okay, so let's go now to the second endocrine gland. You have the pineal gland. No? The characteristic cells or the parenchyma are the pinealocytes described with basophilic cytoplasm with large irregular nuclei. Interstitial cells are also found at the pineal gland, but they stain more heavily than the parenchymal cells. They are found between the cords of pinealocytes and perivascular areas. Okay. This is the characteristic feature of your pineal gland. All right. These are your brain sands, or also known as your samoma bodies, or your corpora arenacea. Okay. Their function is to secrete melatonin. All right. Sorry, the melatonin is being secreted by the pineal gland through the pinealocytes class. But the brain sands are just bodies or formation of calcified bodies in the pinealocytes. So a calcified formation of this pineal gland is the characteristic feature, but the characteristic cells are pinealocytes secreting the melatonin. As you all know, melatonin regulates the sleep-wake cycle. So minsan binibigay ito sa mga matatanda na para mag-initiate ng sleep. Melatonin at 1 milligram and 3 milligrams, pero hindi siya pwedeng ma-overdose para makatulog ka. So there are medications pa rin for sleep disorder. But melatonin would actually help you to initiate sleep. Pero pwede naman daw ito gamitin everyday at 1 milligrams or 3 milligrams, depends kung may activity ka the following day. So kung medyo hindi ka masyadong makatulog, tapos wala kang gagawin bukas, you may take at as high as 3 milligrams. Okay? Yeah, so this is a histologic feature of the pineal gland. CA stands for corpora arenacea, or your samoma bodies. Don't mistake this one with the corpora amylacea, because corpora amylacea is found in what male reproductive organ? It is your prostate gland. Your corpora arenacea this time, they are found at the pineal gland, which are your characteristic feature of your pineal gland. Okay? Okay, so next organ after the pituitary and the pineal gland would be the thyroid gland. They are composed actually of millions of follicles. Okay? It is lined with the simple cuboidal epithelium, pero sabi nila, they have this simple squamous to low columnar cells, but in the orientation during your first meeting, it is lined with the simple cuboidal epithelium. Ano nga ba, Doc? Hindi na natin tatanong kung anong lining epithelium ng thyroid follicle. Okay? Because there are some books would tell us a different lining epithelium. Okay? The lumen, or yung gitna niya, contains a gelatinous substance called your colloid or your thyroid colloid. And they are covered by a loose connective tissue capsule that sends septa into the parenchyma. If you would notice, mamaya baka tanungin tayo, what would be the lining epithelium? Let's have a uniform lining epithelium for the thyroid gland. Pakibilugan or underline, it's simple cuboidal epithelium. Okay? Okay. So actually class, yung gitna ng thyroid follicle, which is your lumen, okay? Take note of this. They contain your thyroglobulin. Okay? Your thyroid colloid contains your thyroglobulin, which are your precursor of your thyroid hormones. Again, this is not just a colloid or gelatinous substance. They contain your thyroglobulin, which are your precursor for your thyroid hormones. Okay? Okay, so let's go now to the cells found in the thyroid gland. The follicular cells are your characteristic cells or the parenchyma of the thyroid gland. Okay? They are described as having a round nucleus and cytoplasm with secretory granules. They synthesize and secrete thyroid hormones, your T3 and T4, which stimulates your metabolism or your metabolic rate. So another cells found is your parafollicular cells or your C cells or your clear cells. So these are the synonyms of the parafollicular cells. They are small isolated clusters of pale staining cells that they are found in between the thyroid follicle. So yung mismong cuboidal cells lining the thyroid follicle would be the follicular cells. What are found in between those thyroid follicle would be the parafollicular cells. The main function of your parafollicular cells is to synthesize and secrete calcitonin. Okay? Okay, class. If your T3, T4 secreted by the follicular cells stimulates the metabolic rate or the metabolism, your parafollicular cells, which synthesize and secrete calcitonin, calcitonin class decreases or it is responsible for the reduction in the concentration of calcium by inhibiting the bone resorption. Okay? So basically, calcitonin, it decreases, okay, papababain niya yung calcium level in the blood. Okay? By what mechanism? Inhibiting the bone resorption. Okay? So please take note of the hormones, the cells, and their functions. Okay, so this is the thyroid gland. So look at the screen. So these are a thyroid follicle, another thyroid follicle. This is the capsule. This is the septate. So these are the thyroid follicle. So in this picture class, this is the thyroid follicle, which is lined by simple cuboidal epithelium. And that cuboidal cells there are your thyrocytes or your follicular cells. Those are your parenchyma. If I ask you, identify cell pointed, you have to answer follicular cells. Function, secretes T3 and T4. Okay? What about this C? L muna, L. L stands for your thyroid colloid. So this is the lumen. If I ask you, what is the content of the structure being pointed right now, your answer, thyroglobulin. And what's the function? Function is they are the precursor of your thyroid hormones. What else? Also note the presence of the cell that are found in between the thyroid follicle. And we have the C cell or the parafollicular cell or your clear cell. And what's the function of that cell? Secrete or synthesize calcitonin. If I ask you in the practical exam, cell being pointed right now functions as what? It decreases your calcium level in the blood. It secretes calcitonin, which is responsible for the reduction in the calcium level in the blood. Okay? In what mechanism? Inhibiting the bone resorption. Okay? So, Doc, ba't talagang minsan kasi may columnar or minsan may flat, but majority it's simple cuboidal. And that cuboidal cells are your follicular cells. Okay? Okay, so after pituitary gland, your pineal gland, and your thyroid gland, let's go now to those 4 glands found at the posterior of your thyroid gland. It is covered by connective tissue capsule that sends setae to the parenchyma, and the parenchyma of your parathyroid glands are known as your chief or principal cells. Okay? Chief or principal cells. There is also cells called your occipital cells, and the occipital cells are polygonal in shape pero larger than the chief cells. If it is larger, does not necessarily mean they are the parenchyma. The parenchyma are still your chief or principal cells. Okay? Okay, the chief cells or the principal cells would secrete what hormone? Because we are talking about endocrine system here. They secrete your parathyroid hormone or your parat hormone. Okay, parat hormone. What is the function of their parathyroid hormone or the parat hormone? It increases your calcium in the blood. So kabaliktaran siya ng calcitonin. Calcitonin decreases, pabababain niya, while your parathyroid hormone or parathormone increases your calcium in the blood. So asan ang mga chief and occipital cells? So this is your parathyroid gland. These are actually your occipital glands, occipital cells, but mas maganda itong picture na to. Ay, sorry. Saan yan? Okay, majority of the parathyroid glands are your chief or principal cells. The dark staining cells that are found in the parathyroid glands or that comprises your parenchyma. And ang sabi ng description, occipital cells larger than the chief cell. This will be the perfect example of a picture of a parathyroid gland will be shown to you in the laboratory. Hindi ko na project dito sa lecture. But O stands for oxyphil pero hindi ito yung for practical exam. Okay? Take just take note that oxyphil cells are larger than the chief or principal cells. So what's the function of the chief or principal cells? Secretes parathormone or parathyroid hormone which increases your calcium in your blood. Okay? Okay, next would be the pancreas. Pancreas, as discussed in the digestive system, which is a part of the accessory organs of digestion, has two parts or has two functions, exocrine and endocrine portion. And will be the endocrine portion. The islets of Langerhans are the characteristic feature of your pancreas. They are described as having a rounded clusters that are embedded within the pancreatic tissue or the pancreatic acini. They are polygonal or rounded cells that are arranged in courts. So that would be the islets. They have different cells, which releases different hormones. The first cell is the alpha cell. Okay, alpha cell secretes glucagon. Glucagon increases the blood sugar. Beta cells functions as secretion of your insulin. And insulin class decreases. Papababain niya ang blood sugar. The delta cells, on the other hand, secretes somatostatin. Somatostatin usually hindi daw siya increases or decreases. There's no specific function of your somatostatin, but all you need to know is that they are produced or being secreted by your delta cells. Okay, so please take note of this. That the alpha glucagon increases, beta insulin decreases, delta produces somatostatin. Okay, so this is a picture of your pancreas. The light staining structure here are your islets of Langerhans. The white stainings, the white that did not take up the stain are your adipose cells or adipocytes. And the rest of the dark staining structure found in here are your pancreatic acinus. Okay. Yeah, this is an example of an islets of Langerhans. Okay. That would be the characteristic feature of your islets of your pancreas. Look, class, at the surrounding the islets of Langerhans would be the pancreatic assigner cells or acinus cells. Okay? Immunohistologically, doon lang daw natin makikita or madedetermine kung alpha, beta, or delta cells ang sa islets of Langerhans. Hindi natin identify niya sa practical exam kung alpha ba to, beta, or somatostatin, or delta. Okay? Immunohistologically, doon lang siya madedetermine. Pero, in Junquera, majority daw ng nasa gitna would be the beta cells. They are the most numerous type of cell in the islets. Found at the periphery are your alpha cells, and scattered would be the delta cells. Okay, again, found in the islets of Langerhans would be the alpha cells. Found at the periphery, nasa gitna daw majority ang beta cells. Delta cells would be scattered either in the center, at the center, or at the periphery. Ito, class, yung pancreatic acinus. Okay? Their secretion would be going in the second portion of the small intestine or the duodenum. While here, they are being secreted at the bloodstream depende ko anong blood level, blood sugar level. Okay? All right. So the next organ of the endocrine system would be the adrenal glands, or also known as your suprarenal glands. They are paired organs that lie near the superior poles of the kidneys. They are flattened structure with a half moon in shape, and they are dense connective tissue capsule covering the entire gland. And they consist of two main layers. We have the adrenal cortex and the adrenal medulla. As you all know, the peripheral portion would be the cortex, and the medulla would be the central area. Okay, so this is the kidneys. Lying above the kidney or superior pole at the kidney are your adrenal glands. Dalawa sila. Okay? Dalawang adrenal glands yan. Okay, in the adrenal cortex, let's discuss first the adrenal cortex. They are subdivided into 3 zonas. Okay? 3 zonas. The adrenal medulla, they're just cells which should be talking about mamaya, the adrenal medulla. But the adrenal cortex, tatlong zonas. You have zona glomerulosa, fasciculata, and reticularis. Okay, so listen. Zona glomerulosa, that's the outermost portion of the adrenal cortex. They are arranged in closely packed, rounded, or arced clusters. They secrete mineralocorticoids, primarily aldosterone. And what's the function of aldosterone? It is responsible for electrolyte and water balance. Okay, that is the first zona. From outside, you have the zona glomerulosa, which secretes aldosterone. Okay, so this class is the adrenal glands. This is the capsule. The outermost layer is the adrenal medulla, adrenal cortex, and yung mga blue na yan, veins, blood vessels, this is found in the inner medulla. So gawin natin siyang, i-digest natin to. Okay, yung adrenal cortex. This will be the capsule. The outermost layer is the zona glomerulosa, which secretes your mineralocorticoid, responsible, or the aldosterone, responsible for regulation of water and sodium balance. Okay, class, look. This area right here, this is your zona fasciculata, and that would be forming a major or majority of your adrenal cortex would be the zona fasciculata. And this one, class, is the zona reticularis. The reticularis is closely adherent in this area, and we are at the adrenal medulla. Okay, so if this is the zona glomerulosa, secretion aldosterone. Zona fasciculata, majority of the adrenal cortex, and reticularis is adherent to the adrenal medulla. Ang clue nyo dito, class, is GFR or the glomerular filtration rate. Ayun ang lagi natin tinuturo. GFR from the outermost to the innermost going to the adrenal medulla. Okay? But what are the significance of those two zonas? The zona fasciculata and the zona reticularis. As I mentioned, zona fasciculata forms majority of the adrenal cortex. The cells here are arranged in straight cords that run at the right angle. Their cells are polyhedral with centrally located nucleus, and they are slightly basophilic. Okay. The zona reticularis, these cells dispersed in irregular cords as opposed to your straight cords in the fasciculata. The cells here are small and the cytoplasm is acidophilic. Okay, look. Both zonas, the zona fasciculata and zona reticularis, they both secrete glucocorticoids and 17 ketosteroids. Tandaan nyo yan, ha? They both secrete glucocorticoids and 17 ketosteroids, but there's a catch. Majority of the glucocorticoids and less 17 ketosteroids are being produced here at the zona fasciculata. Okay? Majority here are producing glucocorticoids. Minimal lang ang 17 ketosteroid. While on the other hand, your zona reticularis, they secrete majority are 17 ketosteroids and little amount of your glucocorticoids. Okay? But in the examination, they both secrete glucocorticoids and 17 ketosteroid. Nagkakatalo lang kung gaano kadami. Mas madami sa fasciculata ang glucocorticoids, mas madaming 17 ketosteroids sa zona reticularis. Okay? Understood? Okay, just memorize the hormones and the three zonas of the adrenal cortex. Now let's go now to the adrenal medulla. This is the central layer of the organ. The cells here are polyhedral epithelioid that are arranged in cords, forming a network. They secrete the catecholamines. Okay? Catecholamines are your epinephrine and norepinephrine. Yeah, so these are your adrenal medulla. These are your cells secreting the catecholamines. All right, class. Ang hypothalamus nasa brain, right? Diretso siya sa adrenal medulla. Hindi na siya dadaan ng pituitary gland, okay, to produce the catecholamines or epinephrine. But the adrenal cortex, dadaan pa siya sa anterior pituitary gland, no, secreting the adrenocorticotropic hormone, tapos dediretso siya sa adrenal glands. So meron pa siyang detour, no? Hindi siya directly controlling from the hypothalamus, but the adrenal cortex, no, galing pa muna siya sa meron pa dapat adrenocorticotropic hormone to release the adrenal cortex hormones. Okay? Again, adrenal cortex, meron siyang control from the anterior pituitary, specifically the ACTH. And as we review this one, ACTH are a basophilic chromophil. While your adrenal medulla, diretso na siya from the brain going to the adrenal medulla, controlling the secretion of our catecholamines, or epinephrine and norepinephrine. Okay? Right. Next and last endocrine organ would be the placenta. Okay? Placenta is a major endocrine gland delivering directly in the maternal blood the hormones that are essential for the continuance of pregnancy. The placenta is, the Tagalog of the placenta is inunan. Okay? Kasama yun ng baby na lumalaki. They secrete the human chorionic gonadotrophic hormone or a human chorionic gonadotropin. They are being secreted by the syncytiotrophoblast of the chorionic villi. And this is the placenta. Ito na yung papakita natin sa examination. These are your chorionic villi, your floating villi. Look class, nakita niyo ba yung dark staining structure that are found at the periphery of this villi? Ito, itong mga dark staining structure na yan. These are your syncytio trophoblasts. Okay? Syncytio trophoblasts. And the function of those cells found at the chorionic villi, specifically at the periphery, itong mga to, if you notice this one, the dark staining structure found at the periphery are your syncytio trophoblasts, and its main function is secretes HCG or human chorionic gonadotrophic hormone. Okay? And that is the end of the histology of the endocrine system.